and we are on the last two sessions of this day. Our next session will have an important question in terms of sustainability and circular economy. How can we properly communicate? For this session, we have the moderator of UNDP Turkey Communication Department Chairman Farik Uyanık, NCO Podcast co-founder Derin Altan and Utkul Güneli, Yuvam Dünya Chairman Kıvılcım Kocabıyık, Cross Change founder Tuğçe Akbulut, Pact Agency founder Serdar Paktin, and Circular Economy 101 founder Tunç Karabayar. Mr. Uyanık, you have the word. Thank you very much, Ms. Banu. We'll have an hour and a half for an enjoyable topic. It is something that does not allow much opportunity to talk about, and we will touch upon many obvious things that should be addressed, and hopefully we'll have a wonderful conversation today. And our title, as you've said before, is about sustainability and circular economy's proper communication and how to achieve it. Circular economy throughout this week has been discussed thoroughly, and sustainability, or rather in the circular economy week, the management committee had goals for SDK Turkey or many organization representatives, and wanted to include communications to it too. Of course, it is not enough because we don't think circular economy is implemented properly and entirely yet. We have to describe sustainability and circular economy at the same time properly. And on aside from our daily work, we should focus on circular economy 101 in its entirety. Economic growth, of course, it's a necessity to discuss as to how and why and when to grow, and natural resources used for those growth are overused or poorly kept up, and it has a negative impact on both natural resources and humanity. So, for a sustainable economic growth model, the circular economy idea globally is becoming more and more common. And in this conjuncture, it is important to realize it that same thinkers always think the same, and with same inputs and outputs have to be processed. For sustainable solutions, the growth conjuncture has to be understood, and circular economy strategies has to be integrated into our strategies and have to be communicated properly, and how to comprehensively include this economy model. It's a catalyst, and communication as a catalyst has an important role. Communicators have a conversing role to play. They explain in the world, and also for businesses, convince them, and have to kickstart this change and have to report the good developments globally. Of course, there are external factors too, and we have representatives on both sides here for internal in business conversions, and also people describing the conjuncture. We only miss a journalist. If only we had a journalist, it would be in its entirety, because communicators and media have to be both internal and external to push for the conversion and change. And of course, it is important to fulfill our own conversion. It is good if we can, but we have to understand the trends and changes properly, analyze them, and interpret them properly. And communicators that can achieve this have an advantage. They can share the good stories before others and catch the wave, so to speak, which provides opportunities for business, because there's a demand, a rising demand for change, for this conversion. And the lead of this wave, this change, is by us. I've scattered all my interests and ideas, and now we go for Esmi, our podcast founder Derin Altan and Utku Güven, and I wish to give them the word. Perhaps Utku can have the word. Oh, is it Derin? Oh, I think I'm getting the intro. Oh, as you wish. It is a podcast I follow closely. Maybe you can talk about its name also. How did it begin? And why did you start making a podcast in the first place? The why are we here? Or as for your personal stories, I will ask more questions, of course, down the road. But can we please briefly hear your story? Of course, it is a story we love to tell as to how we got the name Esmior, and we love explaining the story behind it. We had a personal interest in this podcast matter. We were not broadcasters. We had normal people, lawyers that worked, had our own works, or we still have some friend who does practice law still while doing podcast. I was working at UN and during the time when we started the podcast, and it was something real personal. I wish to say again, we had an interest in nature and natural supports, and our interests and research kickstarted things, and we began to talk. You know, we love nature and we see the ruination of biodiversity and the nature in its entirety. And there's a climate crisis on the door. So we got slightly depressed in this matter and we wanted draft projects to help. We had a simpler project, you know, we weren't broadcasters in before. We used to have a project that combined supports and climate crisis. But one day we said, let's just make a podcast. And the idea just popped. And I reacted with that with every male above 16 does podcast these days. Why are we also getting into that trend? And I reacted that. But in this regard, he convinced me. And you know, we don't have to pretend that we know everything. We just need to set the platform where we can ask experts questions and have a good communicative environment on this platform, this podcast platform. And of course, with experts, scientists, and also later famous people in general were included. We knew there were worries of it, and many people that never had the opportunity to talk before managed to talk in our podcast, and they expressed so. And you mentioned the name, and its name is something we like. At a dry summer evening, we were sitting on the desk, a table, and we were really sweaty and hot and bothered with the air, and it reflected on our daily life. So we said, there's no wind at all. Esmiyor. And it is a meme in Turkey, actually, this esmiyor. You know, it's not, there's no wind blowing. It's hot, it's bothersome. And it was a Turkish meme on the internet, first and foremost. And we've decided to use it to communicate it, you know, in terms of climate crisis or famous people. You know, we could just name our podcast anything more official like, but we thought people were bored with the more official approach. So this name was a step we took in terms of communicating more sincerely. And of course, we started the podcast, but at second or third month, and people began to gather, they began to listen. We had a community. And honestly speaking, the podcast world was unknown to us. And, you know, we say 10 or 20 listeners is good. You know, we can have experts on the broadcast and talk about topics, but we've seen a really positive reaction and our communication skills have certainly improved with in regards to climate crisis. You know, we weren't just saying doom is coming, but our messages were more diversified with podcasts, enlargement, with other communities emerging, with mentions happening. We have a committee being established based on the name Isınıyor, it's getting hot. And the Esmiyor podcasts is now, at first it was named Esmior Instagram podcast, but now it's just called Esmior and became much more widespread. It was a newer platform back then. It was easy to produce. And now we're talking on Zoom, for example. We've had many of our podcasts on Zoom. We organized many events. And to gather its advantages of the platform, we have utilized many platforms. The SMUR has become more of a media platform now. And thank you very much. I also discovered the podcast first, then the media side of things later on. And we'll move on to getting on the next round of talks in relation to that. Welcome to Yuan Dünya with Miss Kıvılcım. And you also will get a similar introduction about the history of Yuvam Dünya, which is something we hear a lot of good things about. What brought you here to this point, to Yuvam Dünya? And from the things you've done thus far, what have you learned? We see from the outside you've traveled a good road. Thank you. We established Yuvam Dünya 2 years ago, and it was something that I really wanted to do since I was little. For the longest time, I grew on a small town, and in terms of justice and environment, there are many parents that focus on these topics. My parents included too, and I believe this is something you get from the family. That's something you get raised with it in terms of environment care or animal care. And we were one such family. And in terms of efficiency, not to overconsume, not to waste, it was a part of our daily lives. And later on, I got involved in this. I also joined an NGO, which my mother was in the lead of. And since I didn't know much else, and something else on smaller cities, everyone knows each other and everyone knows each other's worries. And you realize that in terms of sustainability and for sustainable development, you realize that you're in contact with everything in your daily lives. But in terms of environment, as soon as I hit 18, I signed up for multiple NGOs and got more involved. But we always were people that would defend even the smallest tree after it got cut and for climate change. And when I was younger, I started agriculture. In Anatolian geography, we've seen them as really experienced people. Everyone considered that as a meteorological problem where harvest seasons would change and that's it. Some could not be produced anymore. So I normally am a math graduate of statistical math graduate. So I got curious about the sustainability. I received training for it. Later on, the climate crisis training received from many good universities. Later, I studied geography. I got really curious of many things. I worked with many professors in regards of this, and later on, I switched to climate crisis. When working with NGOs and companies, even the one I involved in, we try to do many things, but on the other hand, we cannot just simplify things and explain it. And I realized that this is a problem. It's a complex situation, multidisciplinary problem. And also, I became a mother. And with my existing worries, becoming a mother only intensified them. And the biggest and the most efficient way to eliminate worries is to understand the problem and solve it. And of course, I directed myself to the communication side of things. Many businessmen, many artisans, communicators, and scientists, many things, many people want to do something, but don't know just how to take the first step. And slowly but surely, I communicated with them really efficient names, and we all got together and established Yuvam Dünya. and it entirely focuses on climate crisis and hopes to achieve a collective action against it and make it a culture to do so. It's a culture crisis, as we can see. The mentality of I'm not the one to save the world is something, as we know, governments and private sectors have the most responsibility, but also individuals have some responsibilities to take care of. And we all can do something. And being on the move is a necessity. And once we start getting the move, the social norms that were deemed unchangeable can change. Many unacceptable things become acceptable. And to gather that crowd is important. To lead the change is important. And in this regard, with simplified, basic language used is crucial. So, Turkey, I believe, needs to communicate its communicators with artisans, sportsmen, and scientists and improve on the development and awareness of it. Of course, we conduct many projects. We work with Ministry of National Education with many projects, and perhaps becoming an organization relied on the practical focus of the Ministry of Education and their plan to do so. Everything aligned to make us get together. We have a complex crisis in front of us. And in this crisis, this culture of consumption has to be changed for the better. And we can utilize social media and where leaders that have the word and the louder voice shall be utilized in this as we focused on it. We want the movement of the sports and creativity of artisans to lead the conversion. And that's how we try to contribute for the overall good. Thank you very much for your rapid explanation. Tekirdağ. I grew up on Tekirdağ. It's close to Istanbul, but in itself, it's a humble city. Oh, yes, I was going to ask that we're talking about ecosystem in its entirety, but you also described it as a smaller city. Sometimes both sound similar, and your voice and your motherhood is. I have an 8-year-old girl and a 5.5-year-old boy, and yes, oh, fantastic. Of course, I'm sure that was an important factor for your individual change. Once you catch an analysis, realize something, you want to express it yourself. And I believe we can have mutual points in this regard. When you understand something with no doubts, you want to shout out. And perhaps this is the motivation behind being a communicator or a keynote speaker in these events. And with my notes, now I wish to give the word to other sides. We have a project named Circumcenter. They come from different areas, from Cross Change, Act Agency, and we ask them to describe the Circumcenter. And in terms of circular economy, it's a project from fashion to food to crypto to economy, actively changing and describing circular economy with industrial leaders and speakers. We held interviews for 10 episodes, and as to how they designed it, we'll give them word. And can we also ask about your background? Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Tuche. I'm originally a designer, and I used to be a art director and decor artist in the movie industry for a decade. But IMC social platform became a cross coincidence, and I coordinated projects for a year and a half. I first in the creative side, then later on the business decision taking side. So I had the opportunity to discover the opportunities and hindrances. The cross change became a thing, and both sides had the wish to have a convert to change. And we became a design studio to cooperate and make both sides cohesive with brands and creative professionals. Aside from being a service provider, we are also a bilateral in the discussions. And on the other hand, as we've heard from Kıvılcım and Utku before, these stories and these situations come from individual stories, and people, the creative professionals, have their own personal background to get involved in this. And I consider this to be an improvement in terms of communicating the messages. And the cross change was a platform to simplify the procedures in between. I became a decoder between the business and the creative side, with social, cultural, and ecological impact in its center, with projects collaborated with. When we are designing these projects, with a good coincidence, we also had a design pro change establishment. And with this community and their wonderful people, we have collaborated on wonderful projects, and we have coincided with Sardar. And we will also talk about the project based on our coincidence with Sardar. Thank you, Tuğçe. Hello, everyone. I also wish to say that it has been most inspiring to listen to you thus far. I'm I don't work on circularity of it. I'm more of a communication and management side of things. I'm a son of a white collar, so in my family, of course, I've also focused on not to waste. And later on in the military school years, I also got a, let's say, indoctrination when it comes to not to waste resources. So with these throughout my life, I also reflected on my personal life. In Istanbul, in my part of town, my transportation is on bicycle, or rather I recycle much more things on my home as a personal approach. Where are you now, Mr. Sardar? Now I reside in London. Okay. In here, it is much more easier to ride a bike than Istanbul. And on the other hand, the communication aspect of the business with cultural and sense development on side of things. With brands, we communicate, we recommend them a more holistic approach and explain the behavior and reasoning behind it. And an important thing in regards to that is to have transparency in resource usage and have similar things. And with Tuche, we worked at a workshop many years ago at an IMC workshop. And since that year, we do projects together which inspire us and also allow us to do different things and break the norm, let's say. And we can also go onto its detail later on and close my side of things. Do you wish to continue, Tuche? Perhaps we can underline the collaboration between us and from our side at least, and ease into the projects and make things easier. Sardar is from the strategic side and I'm from the creative side. In these regards, you cannot just apply band-aid and go over it. You have to have a third opinion in regards to things like this. So decoding situations and building an ecosystem, a roadmap, and having creative professionals and communicators and having the strategic side of things collaborate is important. And having a beautiful synergy here was for the best, I can say. You have left it on a wonderful note, because once you look at it from a single perspective, you can't get results. You start to repeat. But sustainable development is a whole framework with three aspects to it, multidisciplinary, and we learn as we do. But there are people that may just start doing things, can utilize our previous experience. So with our future guest, Tunç Karnıbayar, this is a closer topic. We will talk about circular economy 101. We always say sustainability 101 or circular economy 101, but without defining it or reflecting on daily lives of people in terms of something such as this, talking and talking alone will not help us convert. So industrial symbiose, such a cool word can be used here, but we can also say that if both factories are next to each other, one's waste can be other's resource. And when you say it as such, you connect it to daily lives of people and communicate it better and understand when you say circular economy. Tunç Karabayar will describe his 101, and sadly, I'm ashamed to say that I discovered that recently on Apostle when you subscribe, and looking back on the archives, he describes it very well. So we wish to hear from his story, his personal story, and what led you to this point. What have you learned thus far with what you've done? Thank you for the word and also for this opportunity. My story is similar to everyone here and to 2019, as with every graduate in our nation, I worked on a business sector with a hope for career for sales and marketing. I had a 6 years of expertise in the sector, and my general opinion in this regard is that everyone has a set levels of skills and utilizing them for the best. However, I quit in 2019. I went around the Mediterranean Sea and went on a slight adventure in Turkey and began on Favor, my entrepreneurship, a mobile app which works in Ankara to prevent food waste. And when we were developing this, I said that I want to do it my way with no negative impact on a business model side. I began doing research. Favor's model based on circular economies principles in terms of circular economy and to implement it into the Favor more. Sadly, back then, when I started doing this in terms of circular economy, there wasn't enough of Turkish resources for circular economy. Its importance, of course, is food for thought, but in my higher education studies and cultural studies, I realized that a cultural change comes from contribution of everyone into the new system of thinking and give it meaning. And so in the name of Circular Economy 101, I had a kickstart with a simple blog post at first. And as I wrote it, I learned and studied more and made it better. And after a post, it became a bulletin. And our main purpose is to have conducted studies in our nation, of course, described better, and works such as this Circular Economy Week gather and touch upon different sectors, different businesses, and also for the government side of things. But I felt that this wasn't about the everyday folk. So to give a meaning to everyday folk, what is circular economy, I started doing this, especially in our nation, sadly, with the words such as economy and the word economy in the circular economy. Many people just say, I don't get economy whatsoever, so rejected. They think it's a concept with many complex theories involved in it. But sustainability is a word which we heard for a long time now, but as a meaning, as a concept, has become a tool and nothing more. So the procedure began to give it meaning again. So as a content creator, I started, but later on made a platform with entrepreneurship business models also planned. I'm also an entrepreneur, so I can understand that perspective. We also give consultants. And at the beginning of 2021, the World Economic Forum had an initiative for the 60 Circle Innovation, and 10 cities were chosen globally for circular economy conversion model. And with my contacts and that side, I joined the Turkish project leadership. And in Ankara, we got some entrepreneurships in line with the project. We gave them training, and in their business models, we described what can be done or can't be done and gave it meaning and established entrepreneurship. And as a solution partner, where the World Forum at the Ankara implementation or with the networking, we connected people from the private sector representatives and the government side of things, and also from normal people. And in the conversion to circular economy, we set what the needs were and also made partnerships on to satisfy these needs. Project was concluded. We had a wonderful output. Next week in Switzerland, there will be a showcase about the results of the project already. I invite people there too, also. In terms of circular economy, we began with communication, but didn't just stop, just stay at communication. Right now in global, I have friends in London, in cities in Germany. We work as a team. And perhaps in terms of circular economy and Turkey on the global scale, perhaps our role can be improved in this endeavor we have. Maybe a center of excellence can be established or something similar to it. And that's how our procedure goes. That's how I can conclude too. And I had not known this 360 scale to we'll look into it ourselves. I'm also curious, and seeing Ankara represent Turkey was a wonderful thing I also heard. And as you said, yes, many people don't understand economy, let alone circular economy, so people would stray away from it. And our experiences based on sustainability and other related terms with private sector's role in development and the explanation of circular economy, we also had faced many difficulties as you've described. I wish to say that as timing, we're doing well. Having communicators here shows its difference. We utilize the time for the best, and I wish to congratulate everyone for keeping in with the time frame. Now, in Circular Economy 101, we see Yulam Dunya, Ebesmio, and Cross Change. I repeat my notes here. Perhaps we can ask more things about the cross change projects and pact agency and go into their details. On round two, okay, we're here. There's no going back. We all got involved and we are all in this ecosystem in shortest time possible, in shortest time, longest in the shortest time. Turkey had a communication problem in this regard because mainstream media would never touch upon topics such as this. Alternatives have emerged with journalism and activism combining into one in unique platforms. Of course, they're also open for criticism, but they serve the change, the conversion, as Ms. Tuchev also said. We are decoders in this regard. And to become a decoder, you have to be a journalist to describe to people with terms they understand. Activists have a purpose in this as they get involved with people on the streets. We'll continue with Esmir, Derin, and Utku. Again, at your current point in Esmir, in terms of the ecosystem here, your recognition, your fame, or your attention grabbing capabilities are important. How would you describe that this should be communicated? What should be done? Perhaps you can give recommendations for people that follow you. Thank you for the question and again for the opportunity to host us in this panel and exchange our ideas. I wish to thank the organizers. As Utku also answered, when we started, we did not have expectations. We said 10 or 100 listeners. And we held a meeting with a creative agency, uh, and they gave us a tip. And without striking copyrights, they gave us a tip. And they said that this is a side project that you do outside of your working life. Giving time, effort, and some monetary investment in here can make it something certain for you. It won't just be a side gig. As we see, time is the most important resource, but none of us realize it that when your people in the 90s say, oh, I can buy everything. I can buy a plane. I can buy an iPhone cable with the ease they people get planes with. But with some monetary investment, we felt that it wasn't something that's just a side job anymore. So it's an important component to consider. Simplifying things, ideas in your head, and also communicating your emotions. Of course, Esmior's name is a topic, but we did not choose green or blue, for example, in terms of environment topics, or red is an alarmist ring. Green, we picked green instead. It's a radioactive background color too, but yellow, describe that briefly. There's a danger. Things aren't going bad, but, carefully. Just read and observe things. We're not in code red yet. And we want to express that with our pick of color. Did you say green? No, yellow. Sorry, with my excitement, I sometimes confuse everything. Everything's going through my head right now at a faster pace. No, we picked yellow for our logo because, in terms of circular economy, I'm also processing some ideas in my head. And briefly, what we do, and even if we achieve the slightest success with many goals and paths to travel, of course, it is because understanding our mental limitations and broadening our attendance and personnel and covering a wide range of topics. You see, Utku and me, we have a 10 or so people working at the same time, and we held a promise. We want to have a goal. We want to have a goal based on people. But in terms of ecology and environment, there are many content creators, but they hesitate on making communities. Of course, it's not something easy to do to establish communities, but leveling up in a slight manner and opening doors to people that want to join is a lot simpler. As we briefly talked about this before the broadcast, that's where we're heading towards, establishing a community of illustrators, artists, writers, and journalists that focus on the end results of things and everything else, and climate, nature, and ecology on this platform. And content creators are most welcome. We put importance on the collaboration side of things. That's what I was going to say. Also, we say some things are very complex. Circular economy is too complex, but not really. And that's to simplify it, really, based on advices. When it's too complex, you fool yourself. The fundamentals of it, when diluted, can simply just become two or three entrances. Of course, circular economy is happening, there's a circulation happening, but 4.5 billion years ago, I'd say, is the beginning of circular economy. The world is an enclosed system. There's an energy input and an output and a set amount of resources. And that means that we were to establish a civilization, we would have this and that. Of course, we can also discuss things such as asteroid mining, etc., with wonderful technology involved, but it's not happening right now. If we want to use resources, we don't have 100 million tons. We only have 94 million tons of nickel, for example. If we want to produce energy, want to grow, what I'm surprised is that coal still is in use in 2022. A system where you grab coal and burn it for energy, and only ceases when you discuss environment and climate change. Of course, every resource is finite, and due to their prices, there's no economic stability. The sourcing becomes a problem. So, circular economy, climate change, in terms of sustainability, it's important, but it's a concept that's in relation with the nature. It's based on establishing an economy based on sustainability and renewal. Of course, in times of James Watt, it might not be possible, but from 1900s and ever since, this conversion should have taken place. And when you discuss it at the matters such as this, let's say in terms of oxygen, no one says breathe less or emit less oxygen. You know, oxygen is also limited, and we all humans and living beings and animals consume it. But water, drinkable water, has this worry. It is spent. Instead of communicating as start saving water, we prefer to communicate it as, in terms of communication, of course, everyone living in Turkey except Mr. Serdar, he he's in a wonderful spot when it comes to water, but everyone in Turkey, let alone shortening your shower, stop showering. You know, don't communicate, don't wash your clothing, don't do your laundry. Even the leaking water needs to be put into savings. Of course, we need to do the save. That's one. We communicate that, but we also say that there's a systematic problem here. Water resources aren't directed properly, and we're literally wasting it, flooding agricultural land. And as individual, we should adjust ourselves and later on move on to this or that step based on the system. And in terms of communication, as an advice, we should avoid populist sayings. You know, we always discuss with Utku. You know, it may get your followers then, but it also shadows your message. Systematic changes is a constant expression. Of course, a circular economy otherwise is impossible because my household electricity consumption is not up to me to decide. The system decides on how to produce the electricity. And with pressure building up, journalists following up on news, and a media effort, with activist efforts on social media, with individual changes in consumption behavior, we can have this change. And we want to condition ourselves on that regard. And there's a grand picture here. We realize the small part. We are the small part, but sometimes Utku and I always say that let's discuss. Are we on the populist side or still going towards our goals? And with our success, oh, perhaps I can add here that in terms of demo, uh, I'll give some examples here, but in generally, in terms of complex topics with sustainability and circular approaches, or in terms of news technologies, there's a interest in regards to that, and we should comprehensively approach to it. You know, understand what is the center of it or what is surrounding it. In Turkce, I heard blockchain utilization. Someone mentioned blockchain. On terms of blockchain, of course, there's a miscommunication here. Everything is described as really complex or really detailed, but communicators and people that communicate that should remove this mystification of things and communicate with using a tongue such as that. You have a wonderful example in your speech, and perhaps in terms of communication, I can add this thing. Thank you. Oh, I can. One more sentence then. And as I end my saying, uh, companies are aware, individuals are aware, and there should be a proper communication in between. And our SMER collective now focuses on that part too, because lest we forget, individuals, companies, and private sectors should stop hesitating altogether. Wonderful conclusion. Thank you. And in my notes, I also wrote that down, and you really stole words from my mouth. It is not just something about podcasts or activists and where kids and youth are involved for the excitement of it. There's lessons to be learned where communication departments of companies should utilize the best, especially economic newspapers that do news around this should be interested. You said coal, and yes, we should investigate the coal heavily. Paris Climate Agreement or the Climate Summit should not just be news about, oh, we're quitting coal altogether. And we should focus on things such as why is this bank supporting this coal operation, or why is this organization, this NGO is collaborating with that while they invest in coal, or why are you in this media tour and later making news about a company. We should also evaluate and discuss ourselves and focus on the journalism aspect of things. If only we had an actual, like, on media personnel here that we could talk to. Of course, we established one imaginary. And let's continue with Ms. Kıvılcım. In terms of your experiences, what would you recommend to yourself back when you first were beginning? Again, thank you for the word. And as we live, as we communicate things, we realize these more and more that the world is finite and everything is impossible. As we know, world gives us life and her resources are limited and we should respect that. The business world and in every individual should respect it mutually. But the business world, on one hand, should take innovative steps. And as Yuvam Dünya, we work intensively with business because their conversion matters more. And they should start having worries in terms of social and environmental problems. Of course, it can't be our sole worry. The world is going through many things, and the climate crisis is the biggest one of the crises. Of course, not just on ecological side, but also on economy and social aspects too. Companies should be more compassionate when it comes to that. And we think that as Yuvam Dünya, and we work in this understanding. Companies should have new worries, which will they respond with new missionaries, and they should see the nature as a stakeholder. Nature should be the number one priority in all of the matters. Instead of asking for profits, they should ask for the benefits on humanitarian or the environment side of things. And of course, in communications 21st century, with values of communication should be put forward. And Yuvam Dünya, when founded, focused on those the most. We want to be a next generation organization and be it strikeful as if an activist at times, but also collaborate and cooperate with many sides. And as Yuvam Dünya, we of course work with NGOs and companies. We work with social entrepreneurs, or sometimes single individuals, and we help them communicate their message with the bigger companies.
Ve paylaşımcı iletişimden vazgeçmememiz gerekiyor.
We should be communicative and be shareful. We should be honest in our communication, simplify the language we use. At opportunities I get, of course, there's a quote from Hayrettin Kayaca. I spent time with him, so he influenced me a lot. And he says that what's known and unknown, what's needed and unneeded need each other and know each other. And it's a really meaningful quote for me, which was translated awfully. And in guidance of missionaries, of companies and entrepreneurs alike, this should be a quote. And as Yuvam Dünya, we do what we do is simply put conversion in businesses and blue collar, green collar, white collar, irregardless. Through communication channels with R&D, we don't want to be limited to those two, and we want to inform everyone involved in business to get informed. We have projects that we apply and implement together. We have training projects, and I touched upon them briefly, of course. But on the other hand, we have publications. We have a publication named Dünya Ahali. It's a climate and culture magazine in a postal, and later on it became a digital magazine. And Boğaziçi University Climate Change Research collaborates with us on this. We see what is happening on the world what is happening, what is changing in the world and in communication. We read it there. I really recommend that magazine to everyone, and you can really catch up when it comes to weekly developments globally. We have many opportunities to read and to do so. In economic opportunities, climate such as this, during crises, we have many opportunities that we can cash in on. And the youth should see this more than everyone else. Of course, we have communication projects too, as I've touched upon briefly before. Social platforms are the conversion platforms, but also art and supports matter too. Climate support projects began a couple months ago. Our first club was Beşiktaş. We convert the club and calculate their carbon footprint and work on it with training and awareness lessons. And by 2030, we hope to align the club into carbon footprint planning, and they made their own plan after that. Supports is can be utilized for global social change, and research shows that football has a really high conversion power in society. So we worked with Beşiktaş and worked on the communication side of sportsmen. They get the training, of course, not every single one of them, but some of them really love it and reflect it on people. Here we have wonderful videos and everything on the sites, and you can see them too. Perhaps in that small segment, we have a better conversion idea, sure, but to spread it to the people and society, we believe in the importance of the tools. We also focus on the art and every branch of art, literature, theater plays, or songs, we believe that can be utilized. And we had an event on December recently. Nikara Ibrahimgil, one of our founders, and also Borsan Istanbul Orchestra, had a song titled Wake Up Mom, and it was a solution. We and scientists can talk all they want, but the impact of art is vastly different as they converse with the souls in just 3 minutes, and they can communicate with people heart to heart and activate things more efficiently. So we want to utilize this opportunity, use the power of art with wonderful projects on the way. But as I end my words, again, I wish to say that the song with Nil was wonderful, and let's give it a listen. And as you listen, please close your eyes and listen with your heart, and later talk about the possibilities of walking the same path.
Ya hiç ısıramazsam bir elmayı ortasından, dünyaya bakamazsam ağacın dallarından, bir sabah uyanamazsam şarkısıyla kuşların kokusunu hiç alamazsam, yağmur yağmış toprağın. Uyan anne, uyan baba, sadece senin değil dünya. Bugün doyurup da yarınımı aç bırakamazsın. Yeter anne, yeter baba, artık iyi gel dünyaya. Elmayı bana bir tek masallarla anlatamazsın. ateş böceğinin. Göremezsem dansını, arılarla çiçeklerin. Uyan anne, uyan baba, sadece senin değil dünya. Bugün doyurup da yarınımı aç bırakamazsın. Yeter anne, yeter baba, artık iyi gel dünyaya. Elmayı bana bir tek masallarla anlatamazsın. Küçük kollarıma tükenmiş bir dünya bırakamazsın.
Güzel bir proje gerçekten. Oğuzhan Filarmoni ile Gürer Aykal'la ve tabii Nil Kara
With
İbrahim.
Nil Kara İbrahim's sounds, voice, and the orchestra's voice, we've heard a wonderful song here. Hopefully, everyone could feel with this. And with it, I wish to thank you for sharing your story again. And there are many questions here, but we're going over our time. Perhaps we can ask some of the questions later on. And thank you for your wonderful work. And for circumstantial side of things, Mr. Sardar perhaps can have a word on how to do it.
Biz aslında bu yani
Oh,
Utku da derinde Kıvılcım da çok güzel
as
şeyler
Utku
yaptı.
Derin and Kıvılcım has also said,
Herkesin anlayacağı
simplification and making everyone understand easily is the root of our problem, and underlining the importance of that everyone is part of this is important. And one of the best things that can be done is to give examples. So last year in Circular Economy Week on circular design, we held a panel. We had a wonderful impact there. So this design approach was welcomed, and people asked that what can be done. And after the organization, we went to them and they saw us our excitement and helped us for content creation altogether to make projects together. Its project relies on giving examples and describing the circular design and circular economy with personalized purposes set and establishing systems or out of system activist approaches as a change maker or an activist and being part of the system of conversion and share stories. And we gathered their stories and we established the Circum Center. And I give the word to Serdar from here. Of course, the Circum Center, as we said before, on mathematics, it's a terminology used, and we grabbed this term and implemented to our daily lives. Of course, as they said, we chose the name first and designed around it. So the circumcenter describes the circling of a corner object and finding its center. Of course, we focused on the decision makers and the centers of the problem. Business decision makers and activists alike have different scales, different chambers of cores they decide things with. So our first chamber is a personal one in our personal daily lives, how we decide, how we act, what is our values. And later on, we expanded that to the professionalism. And on the third, we talked about the future and the world and what is our decisions impact on the world. And with scales, we held interviews with people and asked questions in regards to that. If you want, we can see a short trailer, a teaser of the circumcenter, and after that we can continue.
The circular economy is an economic system that targets.
Hi there, this is Circumcenter, a series of stimulating dialogues on the circular economy. We conduct interviews with passionate leaders in industries from fashion to food, from architecture to cryptocurrencies, who actively shape the future of the circular economy. With these interviews, we want to deep dive into the core of our decisions in life, business, and the future. We have a mission to encourage you to embrace circularity in your daily life, because change starts with your decisions right now. Welcome to the Circumcenter.
Burada
In here, we usually, as you've said before, they usually use green, sure, but we can also talk about the colors in detail. You have a wonderful green, actually. Thank you. As Serdar also said, our project focuses on, our belief is that, as the fundamental of our collaboration, is that decision makers and the systems parts, and in these systems, we see individuals such as ourselves. We all have these huge stories, personalized stories, and on the core, what we worry about is the leading factor in our decision making. A department, a company, if they have profit at core, everything is based around profits. So you have to change the decision making with this. Of course, we need brands to take the responsibilities, but sadly, we don't have a button to just convert everyone. But having good-willed people and having their systems based around their goodwill with different industrial examples, we can always make them well known and say that, see, people do it, you can do it too. And with it, as we work with organizations and companies and look for third partners, we can carry on these goodwill with examples of goodwill in our material. We have 10 different industries from 10 different countries. We welcomed professionals. You know, normally people on street would of course talk about changing the system. They are called activists, but people in the system are called change makers. So we wanted to obliterate and combine and make a portmanteau of change activists or change makers, where business people can go out on the street with spray paints and write their own. So from architecture, from cryptocurrency, food industry to textile, we see biggest polluter industries. And as we've said, we start from their personal stories and branch out to the systems they built in the system, in the series we are filming. With Sustainable Development Agency and Digital Revolution platform, we work with this. And after the first 10, we can have more collaborators and have hundreds more and add variety to industries and make ourselves heard. And I wish to add a really small thing on top of it. On the second chamber, we also thought of something else as we implement this. And in terms of circular economy perspective, we also looked at ourselves and how to implement it. And with it, we focused on consuming less energy, utilizing resources more efficiently in our production. And we had many paths ahead of us, from recording platforms to using messaging apps amongst ourselves. We focused on the wasted energy. Communication, of course, with big polluters. Communication as an industry is not a big polluter, but we tried to experiment and implement it ourselves. And we now focus on how to lessen it and implemented to things we produce with small scale experiments we do. Of course, there's a production experimentation side of things to it too. Creative industries, as you've said, by their production are not a big polluter, but they are a substantial polluter. In the film industry, I've seen that trucks load of months long journey, and I can only imagine the amount of petroleum burnt. But now we became aware of it. We, of course, try to put it into practice with carbon footprint shrinkage and with the 3P matrix collaboration. We measured the entirety of it. And of course, we have a transparent reports made after, and we also try to listen things as we learn on the road, so to speak. So creative industries and communication industries have their own responsibilities, which they take on their shoulder, and we try to defend this with practical impact of it, with the ecological footprint awareness, and on the other, we focus on the strength with working with many great companies, with messages, with visions established, and sharing them with the users and share with the storytellers and become aware of the power of communications with greenwashing campaigns and many other things. We all always blame the company, but companies with these ideas also work with the producing creative side of things with agencies. And we all bear the responsibility in this regard. It's no longer that it's that company or that person, and people that also put the blame on others also have some to blame. So we all have to shoulder our own responsibilities and have transparency in this regard. Our purpose is to have net zero emission, uh, safe and harmless and an honest expression with a goodwill at its core, and have a concept of communication. And we're doing the first rounds of experiments in this regard, and hopefully other organizations can learn from it. Thank you for also stating that we, of course, have to look at ourselves when we're accusing of others. There's no clear cut picture in this regard. As to how can we watch or learn about its details, can you give us brief details? There's a cross change curated, of course. It's one of a kind. You can follow it. You can also look at us on our LinkedIn or on our website. We also have additional platforms we share. On Circum Center, when you look at it, I can see anything, but I can find it with curator, correct? Of course. There's also a circumcenter.world, which will be live momentarily, and you can see us on our website also. And that was a good point to touch upon too. Thank you very much. And of course, we can have perhaps a really short third tour. And I wish to move on to Circular Economy 101 now. And of course, you also have traveled a path. And when you look at things here, we touched upon every topic. And I believe in 1.5 years, you went through many fields. And my question is, what have you learned and what advice you can give? Again, in communication side of things, perhaps I can talk about my experiences. Circular economy, firstly, has to be understood properly because it's entirety of a thought process changing. Economy is not as simple as you've said before. It's not just some beautiful development of strategies of resource utilization. We're talking about an idea, a thought that needs to be implemented on everything. We see on the education, you get info, you go through exams, you get results. And this is the same linearity in education as with the economy. But circular economy and the concept of circularity is different in its entirety. So that's why, as everyone said, that we should really get down to the street level and start creating content, even on the economy side of things. Of course, we had reactions. These are really simplified with no technical details or everything. And that showed me that I'm on the right path. Of course, right now in our bulletins, we also have a detail segment where we go into the details of a week-long segment with much more technical information in our talks, and which can help everyone in their own endeavors. And in a cultural conversion or revolution, we know that media and tools of communication, as they develop, as they emerge, their importance have become much more apparent. And utilizing this for the cultural change, it's not just limited to NGOs or companies or government, but the main element of them all, individuals. And of course, for that reason, I tried to stay simple. And staying is true, I believe, because misunderstanding circular economy may cause many things, such as the word sustainability, as we've said before, which became meaningless on the large scale. And when you look at things now, I believe in the program, there's a academic group from Hayat University conducted something, and they look at the definitions of terminology of circular economy, I believe in 2019. In 2019, there were 114 different definitions of terminologies. And of course, you cannot simplify a term with 114 different definitions. People often think about recycling. Of course, recycling is not in its entirety part of circular economy, or perhaps secondhand usage of goods and reuse of things. Of course, they are part of a circular economy, but not the entirety. And of course, if we do not set on a definition of it, we will continue to make our same mistakes. And we'll only stay on the recommendation level for private sector companies. And we work with many people, and I know that regardless of what I do, I'm alone. I'm just a person, or I'm just a company, or I'm just one thing. And this is the emphasis that we try to change. That no one, in our opinion, should think about this, that if you start doing something, others will follow. And with a correct understanding of things, giving proper definitions to circular economy or climate change, I believe the understanding will become better and for the bigger, and it will comprehend and include all the society. And lastly, perhaps on the private sector, I can give a small criticism that climate crisis and sustainability and the greenwashing has applications, sure, and changes, but not as everyone thinks. You know, it's not so easy to blame A company or B company, but for results, for the understanding of circular economy and managing crisis, you should also not approach at a populist approach just to get attention. And sadly, it is an insult against humanity, even. And to truly prevent some things or to truly cause change, you should go for that. You see, you know the term ESG, and this disciplinary should not just be adopted to get much more investments. And I believe that's something wrong to do. And in actuality, we should look at actual threats and take steps to combat those threats and not to play by ear. Thank you for your sayings. And we see a huge question list, or so I would say if we had some, but sadly we don't have many questions and we're running low on time. So we'll start from the end and we'll utilize our time for its best. My question to Mr. Tunç for long-term trends. Perhaps in throughout of our life with e-bulletins and podcasts, we won't use them forever. Our channels and topics will evolve, and the difference, the change will be triggered from some other points. What is your opinion in regards to the future of the change in these areas? Of course, thanks again for the word. Of course, communication channels' future is not easy to predict. Science and technology can change course haphazardly. Many things, such as TikTok, which we didn't care, but has become an important platform for communication. So, utilizing channels and utilizing them as tools are not easy to predict specifically, but digital technologies, of course, are permanent. But what I can say is perhaps that our decision making process and action taking process will become much more uncertain. We have NGOs, governments, people, and activists are aware, but of course, with COP26, we only see couple small hesitant steps taken. Perhaps these steps can be taken with more certainty, and I hope they will be. But in regards to specific guesses for the future, I cannot say anything clearly. Perhaps I can say that everyone has their own responsibilities and duties. They should be aware of it and get out of the mentality of I'm just one X. And our implementation, our education system, even, and everything ever since the Industrial Revolution needs to change. And we need to realize the mistakes we did back then now impact us now. Thank you.
Çok teşekkürler. Tuğçe Hanım, sen de
Wonderful.
söylemek
Thank
istediğiniz
you. And
kısa
to
oldunuz gerçekten. Sizden de kısa
your do it even. And now, can I give the word to you two? I wish to correct something first because I was really excited. And in terms of following, in terms of Circular Economy Week platform, we have main partners also in here, and our content will also be delivered through their channels. As I wish to add a note, Circular Economy platform. This week's, of course, one of the this week's supporters. Of course, they have valuable contributions for this week too. And I can approach this question too differently in terms of communication and approach the communication. For the longest time, we had a different center for communication and the question of what is at the center of communication. For the longest time, we had don't do this, don't disapprove this, etc. And our lives were based on it, based on do nots, which had a scare factor to it or madness factor to it and based on hindrances and with brands to governments to NGOs, everyone had this tongue to it. But in recent times, we see this change, I can say for the better. And of course, some still do that, but some those get reacted to. And we should be much more inspiring and inviting in our communications. And for savings, waste, and with concrete, more, let's say, communication style things, we should be more fluent in understanding of tongue and usage of language. And instead of stepping backwards, we should focus on what's at our core in terms of communication. That's what I can say. If we try to communicate by teaching and educating, that's not as correct because in the past, we all remembered that we often disagreed with the instructions given and did things accordingly in opposition of it. So our language in media should adapt that. In addition to that, perhaps I can talk about scales. More often, one to many communication is the understanding, but communication is discussion and talk where companies and users can communicate in the world. But what is needed here is to have a mutual dialogue from both sides. We had an AI user company that collaborated with us and they made a research for us that in Twitter on many discussions 70% of them are made by companies where topics are not about people, but rather companies. Economy report given recently was that 9.1% of the whole world is circular right now. Of course, organizations have one-sided loud voices, and people of course in them also try to do, but majority of them, and they cannot even express their ideas or methods to people that follow them or are interested in them. Organizations don't talk about that. I see this as a failure. I see creative minds, organizations, companies so huge that fail to say something so simple. But of course, the people, the main focus are ignored in here. As Serdar also said, we should focus on why we communicate. I can also add that who do you communicate to? Do you have any idea who it is and where's the goal? What do you wish to communicate? And amongst these scales, we have to go inter between. It's about designing a system and having a more systematic approach, a more comprehensive approach. And good news, we have a second question, which is about local administrations, information, and involvement as much as the private sector. What would you say with your work? And in short, yes, of course, we take part in this as everyone does. And on SDK level or other NGO levels, UNDP, of course, does it. And of course, include local administration to it too. This is a wonderful continuation of the question. Of course, we talk about things such as climate change all the time. Aren't you depressed, overwhelmed? How do you balance yourself? Of course, we get together in areas such as here. We talk about many things as if we're a therapy group, and many people, as they talk, calm down. They come up with solutions. Hope is an ingredient of it. Without hope, you cannot produce any results. And to produce hope itself, and if you don't have the means, you talk to gather hope. We believe in the strength of talking. And let's continue with Miss Kıvılcım. Perhaps a couple sentences for your answers in regards to future prediction. Of course, I agree with what Tuğçe said. We should be much more inviting, comprehensive, and not as discriminating in language used in communication. We should not fear the unknown and should not hesitate or have misconceptions of it. We should be hopeful and good willing, and of course, keep them always lively. There's a Czech literary art writer that said, it's not as you think. Hope is to communicate your goodwill and in your deeds. And I believe this is a wonderful words of guidance because on one hand, as we know, that what we eat or drink or wear or use today is based on the shares of the future generation. So we have to change the importance of communication and its future is unknown, but I know that we should change something today. Companies should clearly decide on things. Individual should move as one, as Tuche said, individual should reobserve their choices and picks and focus on companies and choose their work or elected parties in accordance. Thank you for this wonderful conversation. It was really inspiring to hear all of you. For us also, Kıvılcım, and for last, let's give Esmior a word. What is your future like? Are we more overwhelmed or getting worse? In that regard, of course, I'll give the word to Utku too, but of course, we also feel the pressure, and it's a reality that you just have to accept with effort. You can compensate, and I give the word to Utku. Oh, thank you. Of course, I also want to join here, and we also react. Of course, in psychological aspects, there's a terminology in that listed in the books, but eco anxiety is a thing. And we all live this through in our work, we also face it, and in people we talk to, we also face it in them. We began working on a climate chamber as a collective gathered, and it is like a group therapy. In Turkey, we have many things, groups for perhaps like Alcoholics Anonymous. And of course, there's a structural matter to it. And we also held our climate related organization online. In our collective house, we will hold more. And we talk about our daily lives and the things we face in our daily lives and express that to our everyday listeners. And I believe in its importance because, in terms of helping humanity, I am from that sector of things. And I believe my experiences and others' experiences can help many, many people with listeners dropping an ear. I believe they can also contribute. And I give the word to Denin here, but I really agree on what was being said by Tuğçe, Kıvılcım, and Serdar and Tunç, and they all have a mutual thing. We should abandon the language that restricts, and we should utilize a language that invites or motivates. And we can see its importance and impact from day one. And in terms of economy and creativity side of things, communities now become much more important. And we know the community's importance is apparent for a creative economy. I see the understanding of a creative economy emerging, even on channels and businesses. People now don't find companies, they find sports stations, for example. They work over other companies, collab with them. There's a rise on people working freelance, working creatively. And I see this trend rising of individualism. And of course, first adapters and best utilizers of technology have a better understanding of it. Of course, blockchain technology adapted this the fastest, and it is transferring into much more creative side of things. I believe this will be a trend. And in terms of what we do, I believe we will move on to that regard. Of course, as Tunç also said, we also work with companies, and we also have the instruction with companies we work with of don't do not. Of course, we work with companies a lot when it comes to strategic development and communication and public relations. And what we say usually is that companies were always one, two, three, but now we urge them to do 100, but tell three things they do, because I wish to emphasize the importance of it. And you can Google it up online, because individuals blaming the current situation in the 2000s, they worked with a creative industry collaboration with a petrol company, and they asked the question of what is your carbon footprint. And I always remember the question the petrol company asked. That was a brilliant idea. And that's an example used. Of course, it is late now. It's in the past. It is now about individual responsibilities, and it's about accepting mistakes and working towards a better future. It is no longer about A bank is better than the B bank, but it's about the banks getting together and working together with a collective movement. Thank you very much, Derin, Utku, and everyone else for this wonderful conversation. Sadly, we're end of our time, and we gave the word, as we said, 5:30 was our ending. And we talked about an area with journalists to everyone has contributed greatly. We held wonderful questions. We also held the problem We also have the question of, can we communicate through social media? Of course, with such beautiful conversations, Circle Economy Week will continue, and we wish everyone a good day.
Sayın Uyanık, Sayın Altan, Sayın Güven, Sayın Kocabıyık, Sayın Akbulut, Sayın Faktin ve Sayın Karabayar. Enerjisi çok yüksek, çok keyifli bir oturum oldu. Katkılarınız için çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Değerli katılımcılarımız, sıradaki oturumumuz 15.45'te başlayacak. Kısa bir
Our
aranın
next session will start at 3:45.
Şimdi sırada günün
And
sonu.
now we will have the last session of the day, again, answering an important question: how to change consumption culture. And for our session, our moderator is Oluklu Mukavva, Industrial Secretariat Umar Yılmaz, Refika Mutfa Kitchen founder, Refika Birgül, modern artist Deniz Sadıç, and communicator and social entrepreneur Şule Yücebıyık are invited, and I give the word to them.
Teşekkürler Banu Hanım. Değerli konuklar, Döngüsel Ekonomi Haftası'nın 4. günün son oturumuna hoş geldiniz.
Welcome everyone for the last session of the fourth day of the week of circular economy. I am a secretariat and I also focus on circular economy. And as a chairperson, I also work with companies. Again, we will talk about one of the fundamental part of circular economy, the consumption side of things. I'll talk about consumption briefly, and we will focus on the work they do on this field. And then we'll have a Q&A session. Right under the screen, there's a question button which you can press and ask questions to everyone here. If you wish to express your opinions and ideas and also ask questions, you may do so. Now, looking back on consumption, why we focus on it? Consumption is the existence of people throughout time. Simply put, it's a multifaceted aspect, perhaps can be discussed for hours, and it is something that can be discussed in its entirety for days and weeks to come. And if you look at it, it is something that should be discussed and evaluated. Consumption changes as people develop, but after 1950s especially, in the history of humanity and consumption, many things change. Post-World War II and the industrialism and the production rapidly increases. And ever since, of course, there has been stagnations, but back then, if you could produce and if you realize that, you wanted to sell it and build selling strategies, and marketing becomes a thing. Sales and marketing goes hand in hand. And in the 1980s, again, we see breakages happening. Communication globally happens. Logistics become easier. Import and export become much more common. Produced goods have added value, functionality expectations, and also at that time, design, aesthetics, and luxury takes front stage. Many things that sell a product become a thing, and the consumption culture changes accordingly. And right after those, we get branding, and branding consumption, their added value, and with the stories, we see the human needs, psychology, and sociology get involved in it with campaigns, advertisement, discounts. They become colors of our life. And with it, of course, everything changes, evolves, develops. In terms of consumption, some aspects are slowly recovering. Let's say, for example, how the goods are delivered. It is something that changes, of course, daily. Corner stores, markets to supermarkets, we see retail change. And we see even more variety and options now. In the past, we used to go out and shop ourselves, but now we can easily, comfortably reach out to goods with more options. Payment systems also has seen rapid change and development. We only could spend what we had on our pocket before, what our wages were. We had to plan budgets monthly and shop accordingly. But now, with added payment plans, credit cards, and new payment systems, we can simplify selling, and it is all based on consumption. Of course, online shopping and e-trade is another emergence point, which is a whole different topic. And today, everything I said, everything I just described, where the function of a product, the luxury of it, its delivery to you, payment systems, The variety in everything develops every day. We get more product, easier delivery, easier payment, everything to ease the purchasing happens. Of course, all of them have a positive contribution to our lives, and I'm not complaining, of course. These make us save time and energy. But aside from it, there are also some disadvantages. Everything we consume, everything we use, every cosmetic product, the food we eat, the clothes we wear, our natural sources, replenish. Using it all this intensely, this fast, we have a rapid consumption development, and the planet, of course, cannot keep up in resources. This means in short time, our generation or the next generations will not have our capabilities. Can we take this risk? Of course we can't. So that's why we need a change. And to discuss this change, we have esteemed guests here to discuss the change in consumption culture. Now, to my first guest, Refika Birgül is someone we all know. She's famous with her own YouTube channel and programs, has a published book, and in this regard, in what we talk about today, sustainable production, preserving local tastes, and in order to prevent food waste, she was a lead on many platforms. And I asked my question to her. Hello, Miss Refika. Hello, I'm really happy to be here and giving us the opportunity to meet and gather and allowing me to talk with many important people here. I'm a fan of Miss Sadic, for example. Uh, Thank you. Of course, there's much to talk about. Of course, for sustainability, we know your work and we follow it closely, and you always emphasize it on events you partake. You give messages to consumers and you integrate it to your work and take a lead in this regard. Can you briefly explain what you do in regards to your work? Why is it important for you? Of course, for me, there are three different hats that I wear. One of them, as you said, is about cooking. I'm a chef. I cook, and especially with economic times we go through, with the climate change happening simultaneously with results we see on the field. If something happens, it happens on the kitchen first. And this was apparent, it was on the horizon. And as a belief, I'm an Anatolian woman, and the term sustainability for years, we've seen it appear as bounty. Of course, the comprehensive and ever increasing, the continuation of sustainability. And we use the word in Anatolia, bounty. And of course, we've felt as if the pots and pans were never enough to cook. And we are people that feel it in our cores. So in my work, what excites me the most is that every behavioral change in our lives reflect and often start on the kitchen because food is important. It is something you eat at least 3 times. Perhaps some with intermittent fasting do it twice, but we think about what we eat even more, and on a circular economy for a sustainability of it all, our production, our feeling of production should not be hindered. Production gives humanity a discipline, a moral delicacy to it. And sadly, our production and consumption have a gap, which is widening. We work on our computers, earn money, something, and switch. And we buy something from the computer and consume it rapidly. But back in the day, as you all know, we We would buy chairs and everything. We would build it ourselves, repair it ourselves. We used to weave. I'm from the 80s. I'm not that old, but we used to weave our clothes and patch them up and fix them in our childhood. And from holiday to holiday, we would only receive new clothes, and most of them would often get repaired as years go by. But self production in humanity gives the value, the, and you start having a different look to it. It is something that we reflect on our daily lives, and cooking is that in minuscule. And you may be a computer engineer or a fashion designer or not, but let's say you may be a doctor. You somehow, amongst the services have, you have a physical production and give yourself a reward. That's my first hat. My second is I graduate from psychology, and in human psychology, belonging, happiness, and order is affected by this. And of course, the third would be that these lands, Anatolian lands, were bountiful, and we hold responsibility. The word bounty, back in the day, we would say a spoonful of rice would not get thrown in order to preserve bounty, they would say. And I know the value of these lands, and if I don't preserve it, they will disappear, and I'm fearful. So that's my daily life, and my struggle has to be focused on preserving it. We used to eat bread, kiss it, put it on our forehead, and set it aside for preservance. Let me give you some scary data. For example, milk is the fundamentals of many, cornerstone of many meals. To market, we waste half of it. On the markets, we buy them, bring it home, and when we bring it home, many things are used and wasted on percentages. Vegetables are the worst. Fresh vegetables are wasted 53%, unused, just thrown or wasted, rotten, oh, look, it's getting rot or molded, etc. And 53% of vegetables and fruit are thrown. Fish and other goods, sea goods, 13%, 34% of bread. We used to count bread as a blessing, give it as feed to birds, to stray animals. Now, 34% of it waste. Grain, 32%. Meat, it's expensive. 1 kilogram of meat is expensive with tons of water wasted, and the meat is wasted 17%. And the most crucial thing is that that meat was alive, and we should utilize it due to respect for the life, but 17% of it is wasted. 41% of milk based products are wasted. These are really horrific numbers. So we have this situation happening, and some of them, of course, are cooked and wasted as food after being cooked. But in this regard, we see an average of 40%, and so we can say that average of 40% of everything is wasted on the kitchen, and this is a really serious resource that needs improvement. And the purchasing from the markets is another thing, from the supermarkets is one thing, bringing them home is a thing. Where do you keep your tomatoes? In the fridge or just out there? You buy bananas. Do you put them with the apples or separate them or wipe together? There's an ethylene gas in it is a hormone that nourishes the fruit, but when you put it in the same bag with other fruits and vegetables, those hormones cause rot. The same gas that flourishes it also ruins it, but it is also preserved throughout the whole ordeal. Of course, I explain this to people and prevent the terrible things that might happen. I also remember in D Cube team, some of them are my friends from the university time. We have mutual friends. They would buy things and only eat one piece of it and just throw the rest of the food away. And back in university days, that's when I got shocked and I learned about the importance of it all in my dormitory years. You know, we say that if we are not doing these and we have these percentages of waste, others, you should think others as doing much, much worse. So that's what I've been working for and against. There's much to do. And there's a restaurant side of things, of course. Restaurants have a serious food waste. There are people that take care of dogs and cats, and seeing all those wasted food on restaurants not being utilized anywhere else seems really abhorrent for them. For example, market chains, supermarket chains, food that is getting expired are not given out to other people. They especially dispose of them in the most terrible manner. But those expired foods, perhaps as they get expired, perhaps could be sold from a discount. There are examples of this in Spain, and there's an example of those food that are about to be expired given out to prisons for consumption, etc. If we want incredible things that can happen, when you look at the packaging, there's a date, recommended date of consumption. They look at this and go, oh, of course, they recognize it as expiry date. The recommended date of consumption and the actual expiration date are different. And 9 people out of 10 don't look at that. But it's not something many people look at it in detail.
Bereket kavramı
Especially the concept of bounty is coinciding with nimet, the blessing. And when you look at the old times, the humanity at first was counting the blessings of nature where the land, the tree was holy. It's not like religious, but let's say humanity, for the sake of living, considered nature the source as blessed, and humanity was very acceptive of the holiness of it all, but are detached from nature from time to time. We also lost the touch when it comes to planet as to how food comes to us, what road does it go through. And in this regard, these ideas are important based around the words of bounty and blessing, and reconnecting with those two ideals could really contribute to us. The percentages you said are incredible, and corrections of supply chain have to be done immediately. Correct packaging, you also said. These numbers, Miss Umay, are from supply alone. Oh, there's a part of it that's not in supply too, where goods in the market are. We, as the end consumer, bring it from the market. The numbers, the percentages I gave were for end consumers, which is a whole different topic. Absolutely. In terms of supply, there's many things that need to be done, such as the improvement of logistics, correct packaging to protect the consumables inside them, establishing correct chains, and on the retail side, there needs to be recovery and work to be done in terms of preserving and presenting. Thank you. And we will also be together on the round two. And to all of our attendees here, I'm sure there are questions here. As a reminder, under the screen, there's a box that you can click on and send your comments or questions. And now we will continue with Miss Denise. I wish to say welcome. Hello. I wish to thank Ms. Refika with a new idea that just exploded in my mind. For years, in terms of sustainability, I focused on production bans, procedures of production, solid waste facilities, etc. I always go to them and examine them and think about what to recover. But home waste was no idea. I had no idea about home waste and I could not think about it. The numbers you said are so serious that I cannot believe that I myself don't produce much waste, but in terms of food, I have the similar sensitivity in this regard. So I overlooked those. So am self reflecting right now. Thank you, Miss Refika. Of course, I was going to talk, but now I have like 15 other topics to talk about. Uh, I'm glad to hear that. This year, we'll try something. We also work with other 40 people in here. We hope to convert our kitchen into 100% sustainable with a net zero waste as an experiment. And on YouTube, we will have this developed where we get our energy from the sun, our water from recycled sources, and perhaps we can even collaborate on this. Of course, why not? Because I really enjoyed what you just talked about. I really enjoyed listening to you. Wonderful. And these sessions and these panels focus on this exactly. I'm also really grateful about what you talked about. I'm sure many people that attended here today and talked about things may cause changes in others that are listening. So we are all really grateful to talk about these topics and to everyone that has contributed to this with their topics. Again, thank you. Now, Miss Dennis, I was going to say that in terms of circular economy, we talk about industrial persons, factories, and with leaders in their fields. And you are the first artist I see in this week. I looked at your work. They are really interesting. And there are many people that may have met you for the first time. And once they Google, they can see the cohesion of your beautiful work and admire your output. My question to you will be about you and sustainable art. Can you describe what you did or why are you doing it? Of course, we tried to put a definition to it. We have a problem of sustainability. In 2010s, when people were barely recognizing environment friendliness and whatnot, as an artist, then I looked at objects and realized their waste potential. I would see chairs that are thrown to trash, not inside the trash can, mind you. It still has use, but they would throw it on the garbage and say, oh, someone else might see it. I see textile waste, books being wasted, and other types of waste next to the trash cans on the street. I would get them and ask myself, can I include them in my art? And that's how the idea popped in my head. So I started gathering things, sometimes using my own things and made art. I believe in 2012s or so, they said, is this woman a laborer or what is she doing? Many people asked questions, but what I believe is that every object goes through difficult procedures and with an incredible production with energy put and nature harmed. And we, as consumers, take enjoyment out of all the hard work and wasted resources and acquire them, even though we don't need them, use it a couple times, toss it, and buy the next thing. So it's a really interesting story. I had denims pants on me, and I learned about the history of denim. And after learning it, I said that I respect you. I respect this pair of pants with the fabric, the textile work, the stitching, the logistics and transportations, the marketing of it, by meanwhile harming the nature substantially and sold for so cheap. As Mr. Efika said, we used to buy clothing from holiday to holiday, but now when we get bored, we go out and buy stuff and consume things. But that consumption requires so much work with so much energy, buses and cars, oil and petrol, profiting from all of these and having the bounty of it all ignored was devastating for me. So, in my work, I try to do is explain the value of everything. Everything produced goes through many cycles in production, and I won't let them thrown. I give them value and turn them into art. You can see this 50 years later or 100 years later. As you know, plastic has a life cycle of 4 to 500 years, and perhaps that plastic piece of art can be seen by generations to come. I, as an artist, pin them and focus on it. And on different shapes and forms globally, people in their homes or organizations may get inspiration from it. And everything I just talked about is about the sustainability of an object. My second topic would be something about I'm disturbed about, where the art is cast aside from daily lives. Of course, we go to museums and galleries perhaps twice a year at best to set time aside, and going through all the hoops may be difficult. Of course, I'm not questioning because we are in chaotic and difficult world, but the art has become a so-called luxury. But we forget that ever since Göbekli Tepe, art is an expression of existence in pots and pans, in textile, in carpet, and food. There's a thing about food and the culture. It's incredible as an art. And all of them were points of expression, but we took art, put them in white cubes, and made them unreachable, misunderstood, or based everything around the question of what did the artist mean by this, and carried and elevated to a obscene point. I believe as an artist that art should be sustainable. You're in a conference, in a panel, in a textile expo or some other expo, or you work with urban and environment at an interview, perhaps in the shopping mall, you're shopping and you come across a piece of art, and that should give you a thought. It should make you think. It should stop you in your tracks, even for a second. So I believe art, with all means, should be configured, and I, as an artist, changed my platforms. Lastly, in Istanbul airport, I had a gallery, but later I moved on to Bursa in a very old dungeon. And now there's Boyner in the shopping center. You can come across my works. And those moments are moments to breathe and to think. As an artist, I want art to be sustainable in this regard. So I thought that to sustain objects, sustain art, and I wonder if the terminology sustainable art could be said. And with a simple definition, I tried to make this apparent. But when I made this from producers to engineers, everyone said that new fashionable terms, even I wanted to be a fashionable terminology, here because everyone is not passing. There are future generations that will live on the same world, and we have responsibilities to our flora and fauna. And right now, the popularity of this, where organizations process these through artists. And as you know, art has power with music, with taste, with texture. It is an effective way to leave a mark on your head, on your memories. You may give speeches and presentations, sure, but one visual, one taste, one touch can leave an everlasting impact and etch it to your memory. So I wanted to use the power of art to create this. And with everyday objects, consumption goods, with daily lives goods, and I tried to make a daily life existing in our daily lives. And that's what I was trying to do, in all honesty. Hopefully, it lasted an impact on people, lit their imaginations, created an image, or perhaps made them or triggered them into taking an action. And for this, I say on other fields, I try to exist more and more.
Harika. Ben de şimdi
You do
sizin
wonderfully.
açıklamanızı
And
gerçekten
based on
kapsamlı
this, I wish to
buluyorum.
say that I questioned
Özel
my understanding of art.
benim
As you said,
görüş
it's not
seviyesinin üzerindeki
just
insanların
something
herkes
that a higher income person can enjoy.
olması, herkes
Art
için
should be for everyone,
herkesin
and it should
anlaşılabilir
be
olması,
accessible and understandable by
herkesin
everyone.
yapabiliyor olması
Perhaps
ne kadar
something
önemli.
everyone can make,
Mesela
and
sanatın
to
dönüştürücü gücü
comprehend its
bu
value,
insanların
and with the
yapabiliyoruz.
conversing
O yüzden
power of art,
çalışmalarını
you
yapmak çok
express
çok
this
isterim.
message.
Bir de
So your work is really
şöyle
valuable.
bir
Can I add something to this? In the world, I wish to say that in this regard, there are many people that do similar things, but Miss Deniz's work and with her work in art throughout the years, and as someone who's really interested in art myself, I have a wonderful energy, a love, and inspiration oozing from her work. This love is shown to things, could be from a bottle cap to a chair or something someone threw into trash. I can feel her energy pouring from that and change the very shape and the perception of it. And eliminating that perception is something incredible. And please look at her works and realize it yourself. Thank you. You had a wonderful explanation to it all, as Miss Refika and you all know that when something is done with love and passion, it is one of a kind, too important. Especially in my work, I focus on my work and prepare my work before a week before its delivery date so I can look at it, experience it, and then deliver it. But for people, sometimes I see people that get up at 7 or work until says 2 a.m. the next day. And I work sometimes for 16 hours on my work. And at best, it will take 2 weeks for me to create something. And you have to have delicate touches for 2 weeks. So to create something and something producing is knowledge too. So with love, there's an understanding of respect for the production and the produced good that I'm processing into art. Sometimes it doesn't seem enough. You always say, is this lacking? Maybe I should update something. Of course, I hesitate too. Honestly speaking, no one would stitch 20,000 buttons, and I do. And it is an object that we touch hundreds and thousands of times per day. It's such a small thing, a button. But when working on it, you realize the grand scheme of it all and realize the importance. And with its history combined, you have love and respect pouring into your work. Of course, there's something else, as Miss Refika have said so. similarly. We also have similar stories. My grandmother, for example, did not have a culture of waste. They would always convert and change things and update it. We would buy clothing, we would patch them, sometimes cut in lines and convert it in textile. They would become later bags for flour and would later become like cloths we use for animals and their warmth, and we would keep them warm, and we would see the piece of clothing degrade substantially at such a long procedure. And I adapted this to myself. I sometimes knit and make textile as a rope, and sometimes I knit the thing, I convert it or make stitch work with it. So I can say that we shouldn't get away from our roots. Really, it's in our DNA, our code. We just have to re-emerge it. And after a small bit of reveal, of course, I talk too much. I'm sorry. No, it was wonderful. And I wish to thank you for your contribution. It's a wonderful conversation, I believe. Miss Denise again also touched upon the bounty and blessings and multiplying those. We heard outlooks that are in similar in roots. Again, we'll come back to you on our next round, and I'll forward my question to our third guest now. Miss Shule Yücebıyık is with us now, communicator and social entrepreneur. And of course, when we were talking about this, we always had this depressing picture, as it seems, talking about things that we're really lagging behind and there's much to do and nothing good is ever happening in this depressing picture. But it's not as it seems. And everyone involved with good examples, with good procedures, explain themselves. Of course, there's much to do, but we also have good news from the front and the outlook of youth in this regard. Am I right? You interact with them a lot with wonderful projects done in collaboration and introduce them to circular economy, sustainability, and cherishing the value of what they have and understand shopping culture. How do they take care of the planet? Can you describe that? Of course, sure, but I have two hats. One's a communicator and one's a social entrepreneur. And I'm sure you also know I'm in the council. And Miss Refika and Miss Deniz's conversation made me direct myself towards the communicator side of things first and foremost. I heard beautiful things here. As a communicator, I believe everyone has a story and everything we do is an expression of it. Miss Refika tells so through her kitchen with the food she cooks. She tells her story in that manner. Miss Deniz with her pictures and paintings and art. And we, well, as communicators, we use our words and stories. Perhaps as a communicator, we should look at a perspective of it where the improvement and conversion of consumption culture should be our topic. And later we'll talk about the youth. But I'm really focusing on two words: bounty. Sustainability is a translated word as not a word that we have, but bounty is a word, and blessing is the second word. Miss Dennis, thank you also for reminding me for that word. As a communicator, I believe in the magic of the words, so it is our duty to carry the torch, as it were. I'm really glad to be here, and I wish to say we should be really glad that we're in such an era that we are facing a system. Let's say it's capitalism, this economic system, regardless of what you name it. System itself is fighting amongst itself. Its crisis cannot be denied, and it has to face the worries. And we are in it, and we are completely in it, and we are helping it convert. Everyone that is listening or talking here are people with a positive with a positive approach tried to change everything. You described the system perfectly, but I wish to give my perspective of it all. After 80s, yes, the savings mentality was emerging where patchwork and stitchwork were much more common in the 80s. But post 80s, this modernization happened as a conversion. And this modernization conversion system focused on splitting us in two: producers, consumers. And they had their roles. Producers had the role of maximum profit, minimum costs. Everything is a resource. Humans even became a resource, and we have a HR department now. Must give variety to things, make so many varieties so you can have much more sale. We had this system in the consumption side of things. Of course, you also had to have a consumer. So we had a consumer group, and they were told that, of course, consume and work to consume, work more, consume more, work more so you can consume more. You're a consumer and you are valuable because you're a consumer. You have the money, you have the power. Money equals consumption equals power. Savings? Oh, you're not. You're stingy. That stingy is a term. My father used to brag about being stingy. Back in the day, his stance on things was valuable, but later it became something used against them. Consume so you're good was the mentality. Of course, you're also an individual and you give this consumer an individuality. You don't have to belong to anyone. Big, large families shrunk to nucleus size. Perhaps an architect and urban planner could talk about that a family's area has shrunk to 35-meter squares, and you also exist as an individual. Every home needs a fridge, a laundromat, or perhaps tables. So this cultural change, this consumption-based cultural change in this regard, put us in camps. And of course, in these procedures, this wonderful concept of effort. I'm sure we're all effort-giving women here. And the etymology of effort comes from painful side of things. And this wonderful thing lost its value in this modernization. Women were discarded, LGBT people cast aside, the variety, the richness of it all was categorized and discarded as we've gone through and are going through. Natural crisis and resources were ignored. It's a recent topic, a hot topic, with biodiversity and waste and plastic waste, air pollution, water pollution. Yes, last year we've even seen mucus emerge on water, which no one had known before, as if the uprising of farmers, demands discarded, ignored in these times as producers and in consumption consumers part with all of our roles set, we ignored in these troublesome, polarizing times. And this, of course, leads to communicators, to us. And we weaved this story in the communications sector. We spread this culture, the consumption culture, and made it admirable, made it desirable. And we are responsible of it. And of course, we should take beating if necessary. Communication, marketing, communicators, organizers, public relations, this wide sector we're talking about here, not just one or two. We created brands. Of course, brands have no problems. Brands are good, but we gave meaning to those brands, said that you are an X person if you have this brand. This lipstick makes you sexy. This perfume makes you a desirable man. Wear this clothes to have a higher status. Use this car. You smoke this. As you know, smoking was an integrated thing. smoke makes you independent. You look feminist even. By using all these things and spending time and money on all of these, consumption culture got widespread to all points, to every extent of the world and societies. And we prototype things, our riches, our culture, our roots, our differences, everything got detached and became a brand under the same brand at times. And we have become consumers that think, act, behave the same, meet the same, and made tribes out of us, prototyped us, and gave us sense of individualism turned into despair of belonging. Stay with the herd, don't get abandoned, was the fear put. Trends became fashionable. Of course, the fashion sector and communication sector always hand in hand. Use and dispose became a thing. They played with the desires of worries, of sexual desires, of poverty, famish. They even said, you're not you when you're hungry, or isolation and everything. All the subconscious or uh, backward thinking sensitivities of our minds were used to build this culture. And to this point, of course, the picture was grim, but sadly, this continues. Cultures, again, nothing is linear, as you know. There's a circular of it all, as you know from the Circular Economy Week, that everything rises, gets popularized, stagnates, and decreases in popularity. This continues, of course, but now on social media, we see it again. We see the culture of influencers emerge. We see advertising and such now take place, but this raises awareness. The biggest evidence of it is to talk about, is to have a week about circular economy. I worked with the term sustainability 10 years ago, and everyone was mocking me back then, where projects, when communicated, we I wanted to say, let's talk about the natural side of the projects or sustainability of it. They just ignored me and said, oh, we're going to employ so much people. We spend so much money. Let's not. And scalability of it was the talk of business. They wouldn't talk about more quantitative things. But as we've said, many things, human effort and so the nature, they just said, no, profit, that's it. Now, things are changing, so I'm really hopeful. We can have these platforms. Miss Rifika, I'm sorry, I was not your follower, so I followed you, but you're above millions, as does Miss Denise. It's incredible, and I wish to congratulate you. So this means that people take you as a role model, people get inspired by you. And that is wonderful. With the might of social media, raising awareness, and youth think that a new world is emerging where the system is resurrecting itself in a new shape. Couple years ago, we started talking about minimalism or capsule wardrobes. As you know, that was a topic of couple years ago. The minimalism culture was opposing own more, have more, demand more, and was a counter voice to it. Circular economy is a contrast to use and dispose, and it's becoming more and more applicable. The term of ownership gets updated with partnership. And I see good vibes in the word partnership where people share things and have a partnership based around it. And I see it spread vastly. The profit maximization gets countered with social entrepreneurship, and social entrepreneurs also profit, but they focus on effectiveness of it all first and foremost as a counter, and they become the rising star in the sector. And on social media, of course, you all follow Twitter, I'm sure of, the old show off attitude, with the current culture we have dominating us right now. You know, those old weddings videos and everything else. And to contrast them, I see wonderful reaction on the social media. I have a wonderful example from a couple days ago. In Üsküdar, a worker that was fixing zippers, and he made a video that was watched by millions. You know, he's a zipper fixer. And reproducing things, redesigning things, re-implementing things to life became an added value. Trade systems and second-hand systems came to be, and trading sites built sites where second-hand purchasing and trading became a thing. Second-hand cars, and with the renting systems, they came to be, and the system is adapting into it. Slow food was a contrast that came against fast food, and both are growing rapidly. Their awareness is rising. The slow food, the organic bazaars, the natural consumption of food, lessening waste is becoming much more apparent. And Miss Denise has said wonderfully, the art has become accessible and has detached from the higher class toy box to become a sustainable art, street art, eye level art with the expressions loaded in their work. And if I'm going over my time, I can talk about the youth side of things later. Let's do it like that because there's a lot of questions and comments coming, and contributors and listeners alike, with everything you talk and describe, are amassing a lot of questions. I was going to set last 10 minutes for Q&A, but I wish to share some of the questions with you. So I say let's start from beginning. We have two questions to Miss Rifika and one question to Miss Deniz. Of course, we can accept more questions. Miss Rifika, they say you are a popular person. We see you on Metro TVs to social media to branding. We see your face a lot. In terms of circular economy, perhaps in relation with fighting against wasted food, with work you do, in terms of making it more appealing, what can you do? Thank you for your question. And now we began picking based on it. When brands want to work with us, we of course focus on that, as Miss Dennis said so too, and Miss Shule said too. This capitalist system is really underlining this current existing system. So some companies, some brands really try to change things while others try to just appeal to the sense of it all. Sometimes I also did things and later hesitated doing them continuously, but many brands exist that do this, and most of them are domestic, and I prefer them because nationalism aside, and with carbon footprint and related worries, I wish to focus on domestic things. You said so. These are seem as if the Western ideals of sustainability is coming, but no, we have our own fundamental approach to things. Of course, some people may think that a Texan mother or Glasgow lass may also have this mentality. Their approach to sustainability and their view on this differs from our Anatolian heritage side of things. And in those terms, in all honesty, our filtering and our approach can describe this to the world even better. I pick brands I cooperate with carefully. Let's be honest, we're getting old, so we're running out of time. So we wish to transfer knowledge, raise awareness, and develop. So I focus on brands that allow me to do so. As for the imposters, They are no longer even on my Zoom calls. And I also wish to add something in between, specifically to Miss Shule. I want to tell you a third word, the kut. You said kut also, the kutsal. Do you know the word behind it? I don't. The word kut in the old days when Turkic people were even before converted, we had this shamanistic belief to it, and it has 10 beliefs. And in, you know, the Anatolian signature where a woman is holding her hands on her waist, you know, those logos and other symbols, the kut is similar to the holiness of it. There's a light, a symbol of light in Turkic cultures, which considers us, that makes us shinier. Perhaps you can remember the old word, the kut, happiness word. And that in the old Turkic culture said that you do good deeds and become much more heard of in the people. And you know the words, modern day expression of happy birthday. Sometimes you know the Kutatku Bilig in the nave. When Karahans were almost getting converted to Islam, has said that Kutatku Bilig's Turkish name means gathering of knowledge and happiness. So I wish to say three rules: that the action of product and its understanding of mentality. One rule of those rules: not do not poison minds or products, they say. For sustainability and the circularity of it all, what we do should not be poisoned, thoughts and dreams included. And the second, of course, in the 10 commandments of Turkic cultures, avoid prepared, prepared meals, prepared furniture, prepared ideas. Avoid them. Don't just grab ideas off of YouTube and adapt them. Think for yourself. Avoid the pre-made. Another one, with a small addition: do not separate mother and child. It's not just mother and child, it's an agricultural aspect to it too, because in circular economy models and in work I do something like this myself, and in the future I'll emphasize that more. The mother and child is the seed, and it's a agricultural metaphor, and in circular economy models agriculture and nature matters the most. I wish to say that, of course, we get the branding ideology from the West. You know, oh, no branding on market goods. But we have bazaars, no electricity spent, no need for air conditioning systems or enclosed areas. You go into the bazaar, talk to the farmer. They, of course, sell you product, but they set stuff aside for people in dire need. Go get the bazaars. They come right in front of your streets, even. And I stop. Well, a wonderful explanation. Yes. I always think of similar things with the circular economy in English. It's Turkish implementation of döngüsel ekonomy. And as they've said before, sürdürülebilirlik, sustainability comes from other languages, not Turkic languages. But its literal localized translation would be bounty in our language. Sustainability makes you think, but when you use the word blessing, you feel it in your body as if. And of course, it's a wonderful connection to our heritage and mentality from ages past, and its reemergence matters. The awakening matters, yes. There's another question. As you said before, in kitchen, in order to prevent food waste, there has been many impactful things. So the question is, what can be done to prevent food waste? How can we preserve them? I believe this is a long topic to discuss, but how can this be practiced? Sorry to advertise, but I have a 12 video playlist on YouTube channel alone. Of course, there will be much more which focused on detail or summarize it for brief watch, but for things that are getting slightly molded or getting rotten, it's spring where onions and garlics are in danger now. Potatoes may get greener. Is it harmful? Is it not? When is it harmful? How much is harmful? Tomato paste. Oh no, it's getting mold. Everything I try to look at, I answer them on my YouTube channel. You can watch them. And of course, their shorter, more digestible version are also coming. There's also a danger of influencers, as Ms. Shule said, and I'm fighting against those too. I love the quote, if you want change, be the change. And I try to go against influencers. I had a meeting on Saturday and they said, Miss Refika, you work too much, I think. I don't have any other mean to do so. I have to do everything personally. They said that the thing you say influencer, this was a really brilliant boy who manages influencers. Influencers should get bored, he said, and to produce, they need to consume a lot. And this describes perfectly the system we're in and the wrongness of it all. And this is still an idea that I'm surfing around and I'm thinking of. But this shows that it's not exactly as you think. I have 2 million followers on YouTube, million followers on this. Sure, it's not about numbers, but it's the message you want to give and to prevent what cannot be done. And that's what matters the most for me because when I first started YouTube, if you don't break the egg on your head, but instead of, others, back then YouTube wasn't as popular. But they said break the egg on your head to get the views.
Evet, gerçekten çok garip. Bu
It
arada
was
bir
really interesting. A watcher
soruyorum.
said they are food engineer and they wish to contribute something to the percentages you gave about. And in restaurant, any purchased puree on 100 units, they say it goes up to 35%, and 30% of any food is seen unconsumable, and 12% are washed off or cut off, they say, as a percentage for a round of over 40% or so waste produced from restaurants.
Deniz Hanım'a bir
Thank you
soru
very much. There's a question from Miss Dennis now. By the way, there's a wonderful comment which I wish to share that keeping people apart from art or vice versa is the antithesis of your sustainable art. We love you for what you said, and they're really glad to meet you and listen to you. I wish to give those messages. And this question, many people have met you because of this platform. When you're creating your art, the things you use, the materials, all of them all of them are sustainable. They asked for the paint, or are you using any other things in similar that are doubtful in terms of questionability? Of, of course, objects are different. There's a chassis, and which is built from natural wood. Of course, there's an MVP, which is sawdust, compressed sawdust, and the parts of it come from post-production. It's a compressed thing, sawdust, and I make sustainable art from it. And I'm not concluding its life. I'm adding value to things you deem trash. And some of them I collect myself. For example, carton, tea bags, tea cartons, milk cartons, etc. Everything's in packaging. Sometimes I know I just start ripping boxes for hours and collect them. We have shampoo, for example, which I was waiting for solid shampoo for decades, but it's only coming up now. But to raise awareness for it, I buy shampoo, but I buy based on color. You know, if I were to make a presentation, I'd prefer pinkish tone shampoo. I don't care about the brand or what it does or it doesn't. What's important here for me is to point out that there's an excessive purchasing of shampoo happening, and I have friends that run out of shampoo weekly, and it produces so much plastic waste. So to raise awareness of it, I have to acquire it myself. But after I use it, I don't throw them away. I gather them and create something out of it to show that you're also producing this much waste. Of course, there's also things such as factories, organizations, and production. For example, shoe production or handbag production, they have leather wastes. In large bags, they get like 5 to 5 or 3 to 3 centimeters squares of pieces of leather. For example, I sometimes buy those and I give them another purpose. Those small pieces by industry, they cannot be used, but they become pieces of art in my hands. Imagine what you can do. Or let's say you're an urban planner to prevent waste. You focus on what can you make with them. Perhaps you can get the leather during production and to save energy and electricity. You can think about what you can do with the already existing waste. And by using resources, I will continue to give material life, not just objects and sustainability. I also want to stand still and make it live on the moment. Hopefully, we will see much more from you. And at the first opportunity, I wish to also see your work physically. Now, I wish to give the word to Ms. Shule again. And in terms of consumption and communication aspect, you touched upon wonderful topics. Do you wish to say anything else on the round two, especially with the contribution of youth and their perception? We have a couple more minutes to talk about, and then we'll have a closing round and end our session. Of course, thank you, Umay. I talked with my communicator hat before and talked about the impacts of the system it created. And right now I'm on business communication chamber chairman, and in terms of sustainability and circular economy, how businesses and organizations can adapt to this new mentality. How can we develop sustainable systems? How can we keep the national might of production of it all as we discuss things clearly? And we try to be the guilty presence of businesses. We try to represent their guilty consciousness of it. And for this, communication by itself is developing and adapting to a new sustainable mentality for more production and less consumption. And we focus on how can we use communication. And of course, and I'll talk about as my social entrepreneur, bilim virüsü, the science virus. I'll be honest, up until my mid 30s, I was always looking for a purpose of the system. I was thinking it's wrong, the brands, the consumption, working for consumption, bank credits, credit cards, all the withdrawals and everything. I questioned my life and realized something's wrong. I should turn back. And I looked into meaning, a purpose, started and was forced to produce and understand. Instead of working, I began to produce. And for it, I heard a definition where discipline matters the most. That's a wonderful meaning. And I wish to join on that. We all have a result in our hands eventually. As a person in this system 4 or 5 years ago, I had this awakening and said that we're going off a wrong path, but our youth should be at a right spot at least. We should work with them. And with them, we should trigger this social change, which is to say that as individual, as people, we have value, not as consumers. We're not just tags or brands or titles we get. We as individuals need to have value. We need to have our individual riches, which should contribute to the life. And we can do this with science and science virus. It is about acknowledging scientific thinking for children and adolescents and raising awareness about nature and climate and what is happening with it. And I dreamed of children and adolescents that had the same idea. We have 50,000 attending to our club. They watch, they contribute, they observe and study. And with the youth, we hope for a system change with a constructive and positive, science focused, and scientifically observing each step with attention, with awareness. We try to raise this awareness to a national or social level. And that's what the science, that's what viruses do. They spread. And we talked about the consumption ideology, and we, of course, want to change it. We talk about individual awareness for our youth. We explain them that being individual, that your retina, your eyes retina, your fingerprint, your blood, your everything is unique. You have variety, you're individual, and it's really valuable. Everyone is valuable. We try to explain this to children. After this awareness, we talk about cohesion. Cohesion with the brands and marketing and everything. More often, they give up and become individuals instead. In our integrated education, and Umay knows too that we talk about people, nature, and try to raise awareness in regards to that. We try to raise a global awareness with green programs and training and education, all free and with the sponsorship of many brands actually. And we offer that to our youth more often. It becomes like a school to them where they enjoy. And giving up on the consumption culture, you need a sense of community, a belonging to replace it. You're not alone. We're all together. We can produce something ourselves. We are all interconnected in this regard. We are a community that think and act together. That's what we try to raise, which I believe is really important. Bilim virüsü, science virus is a community, sure, but we, of course, have many things emerging within us. We have children who want to research space or nature or everything. And we're talking about kids from age 5 to 25 attending here. We want to talk about union, togetherness of it with support mechanisms, mentorships, with Miss Umay included many role models that give guidance and inspiration to youth. We want to talk about action and reaction. As individual, every positive action you take has a positive reaction, and we want to describe its importance. We're also calling it a virus because everyone sometimes thinks they're a virus that just spread around and have no individuality to it. And everything eventually has a great impact. That's what we want to explain. We want to talk about savings and mentality of savings and economy, an awareness on this regard. We are a rapidly growing community. Across Turkey, we have 50,000 or so students. We're not working with mechanisms such as schools or ministries. People just find us by chance. And people with the similar mentality join us. And with such programs, they we want to focus our youth on the conversion of the system. That's really important, and youth plays the most crucial part in this regard. They need guidance in this, and once guided, they create wonderful things. And we're over time, but again, I wish to go back to the beginning and give the question of how to change consumption behavior to all of you. How can we change it? Let's hear your answers, Miss Rifka. One sentence, right?
Biraz tolere.
Maybe with some toleration, sure. I'll make it. All of us have this good in us. This good, and the goodness we observe should be put forward first.
Harika. Çok güzel. Deniz Hanım sizden
Wonderful.
rica edebilir
Miss
miyim?
Deniz, what's your answer?
So,
So, a person should start by themselves, hear beautiful and see the beautiful and spread it and make a habit out of it and make the world a better place simply. Let's change our habits, look for the beautiful instead. Wonderful. And Miss Shule, I say belief, that believing in self, believing in people, in community, and believing in change can make the change. And you, Miss Umay?
Konuşarak değişecek.
And I believe the change will happen with communication, by talking, by exchanging ideas, by keeping it in topic. I believe change will happen. I wish to thank everyone. It was a wonderful today, as you said, Miss Refika, Miss Deniz, and Shule. We wish to thank them for their contribution to the week and as well as for the work they do. We have way too many messages, and sometimes after such events, we get messages on social media, questions such as, oh, what should we do? And we are really happy to see those messages. These are wonderful questions. And if you have similar questions, you can also share them with us. And of course, as with other sessions, if you have heard anything interesting or cool you think, please share them in your daily conversations with your family. Post them on social media and reach out to people. And on your calmer times, without the daily hustle and bustle, think about what you can change in your lives. And of course, you don't have to take large steps from the start, but small things can save up for biggest changes. And please keep your attention on these similar situations. And I wish to thank everyone that has taken a part in this. We'll continue talking about this, but we would love to see you and your contribution in such similar events. So your contribution is really invaluable. Once again, thank you and hope to see you in another event.
Sayın Yılmaz, Sayın Birgül,
Miss
Sayın
Yılmaz,
ve Sayın
Miss Birgül, and Miss Yücebıyık, as well as Miss Yılmaz, for this bountiful and blessed, let's say, event. We wish to thank you all. Dear listeners, we now conclude the fourth day of Second Turkey Circular Economy Week with many aspects of talked, what is fair change, and how can we properly communicate sustainability and circular economy as well as consumption, and for the green adaptation of businesses. To all of our keynote speakers and panelists, we wish to thank them. Tomorrow, will be on the last day of the Circular Economy Week, and on 5 different sectors, we will look at the reports, the findings of conversion potential of industries. We'll also look at natural resource efficiency and other events. We'll also hear about applications. And on the last session of tomorrow, we'll focus on future predictions about the sectors. Hope to see you tomorrow.